Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program that takes a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Rising geopolitical tensions and shifting global alliances have become defining themes in discussions surrounding recent international developments. St. Kitts and Nevis, like other countries, is part of the interconnected global community, and what happens out there impacts us here. You can feel it. The instability in the Persian Gulf has resulted in the disruption of supply chains and skyrocketing oil prices, impacting trade, tourism, and of course, the overall cost of living. How is St. Kitts and Nevis responding to the shifts in the global order, and how will you be impacted? Well, joining us today to unpack these heavy realities is a man who has spent decades at the helm of regional and international diplomacy, Senior Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Stay with us for InFocus as we take an in-depth look at the new global order through the diplomatic lens. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me to welcome back to InFocus Dr. Denzil Douglas, of course, the Honorable, the Right Honorable. Sir, it's always good to have you on our program.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Right. Okay, so let's jump right into it, sir, because there's a lot that we have to discuss. And we can go back to the start of the year. Now, at the 50th Conference Heads of Governments of the Caribbean Community that was held here in Bastia, the chairman, who of course is Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew for St. Kitts and Nevis, he said that the global order is shifting. Where does St. Kitts and Nevis stand in an increasingly fragmented world?
Thank you for being in focus, and thanks, of course, for our viewers and listeners to this program for tuning in at this particular time. St. Kitts and Nevis, one of the smallest independent countries in the world, is at the center of all of this, not simply because of its small size, but because it is part of the regional, international, global architecture of what the world is, politically, economically, socially, and environmentally. And so with what we are seeing after quite a number of years of concentrating and trying to get the citizens of the world become aware of serious climatic and environmental changes that are taking place around us and the need for us to adapt properly through our own behavior, we now have seen, to some extent, a dismantling of that thought and idea that would have programmed a number of global activities which definitely would have impacted us here in the Caribbean region and in St. Kitts and Nevis. I think with the new administration, which seems to be less sensitive.
That's in
to,
which country? You said the new administration.
Yes, the new administration.
No. Okay.
Which, of course, seems to be less sensitive of the impact of climate and the environment and how we live. We here, however, in this part of the world feel differently. And as a result of that, we are engaging our activities as a country with entities, whether they're multilateral countries or organizations, or bilaterally. We are engaging ourselves to prepare our people to deal with the existence of climate changes and the impact on the environment.
Okay. So how would you describe the current geopolitical temperature right now, and why should the man in Bastille or the lady in Charlestown, why should they care?
Well, we care because what is happening out there affects us. There is, for example, the war which has broken out, and that is what I was trying to lead to a moment ago. After being conscious of these impacts on us and the need for peace and peaceful coexistence of nations, we now have a situation where the old conflict between Israel and countries in the Middle East, that has broken wide open. And the United States of America, being it would appear, channeling its energies to ensure that there is no emergence of a new superpower, especially with Iran, we are told, having the possibility of nuclear weapons. That has led to an outbreak where it's no longer Israel and its neighbors, but the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world, basically using arms and negotiations, of course, as well, to settle those problems. But those are affecting us. The attempt to settle those disputes are affecting us here in St. Kitts and Nevis and in the wider Caribbean region. Because the Middle East is where our energy, most of our energy would have come from. In fact, it is because we felt that fossil fuel energy was detrimental to a large extent to the environment. That's why we here in St. Kitts and Nevis began to seek support for renewable energy sources. And that is why we spend so much time. I've spent so much time, Prime Minister, all of us, around the world trying to see if we can find those who are interested in financing our transition from our dependence on fossil fuel to renewable energy. But the world, therefore, is now in more conflict because that fossil-based energy source is the center of the controversy, where because of what is the aftermath of the outbreak of war, we've had blockage of the movement of ships into the Strait of Hormuz, and likewise movement of energy sources out of Iran to other countries around the world, including China. We've now seen that there is a reaction, and I'm sure that they would have to settle in some way.
Right. Well, the U.S. president is scheduled to meet with the Chinese counterpart sometime soon, and so I imagine that is high on the agenda, of course, because as you mentioned, China, of course, is also being impacted by this. But specifically, Dr. Douglas, to the ministries that you lead, and I just want to highlight some of them, because, of course, as mentioned, you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
But you're also the Minister of International Trade.
Of course.
That's impacted. You spoke about the transshipment between the Strait of Hormuz, because it's not just necessarily the shipment of oil through that strait, but also there's goods and other supplies.
Medicine.
That would need to help the Western and the global economy overall. Right. There's speaking to the consumer prices, of course, that affects the price of these goods. And also is tourism. We see Spirit Airlines in the United States going out of business. Travel, it's more expensive to travel now. So how are your ministries, and I'll just name them: Foreign Affairs, investment, of course, which is important to attract new investors; trade, which speaks to what we spoke about, the movement of goods and, and services; and also consumer affairs, which monitors the prices here.
Good.
What role does these ministries have in shielding the population from all of this fallout?
Well, first of all, foreign affairs is critically important because these are matters that would have to be resolved at the international, the global, multilateral level. We, as a member of the United Nations, at the moment we've been bombarded with a number of visitors, diplomats, who are asking us to support their candidates in the United Nations Security Council. That particular election takes place within a matter of weeks. So we are at the center of it. In terms of international trade, we're part of CARICOM. CARICOM has been trying, of course, to align its trade policies and protection of our own manufacturers in the Caribbean region here. And so, again, when these global changes are taking place, we therefore have to adjust accordingly in order to safeguard the interest of our people. Industry and commerce, the same thing, consumer affairs. And one of the things that we've had to do is to remind the country on a regular basis that you must pay attention to the movement of the prices of goods. Not just goods generally, but in particular, again, gasoline. Mm-hmm. Because the energy issue is what has been exacerbated by the outbreak of war in the Middle East. So my ministry, therefore, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Industry, Commerce, and Consumer Affairs. Consumer Affairs, remember we passed legislation, we said we can't legislate the price of goods. What we need to do is to rely on the consciousness of our people, the education of our people, to make sure that they pay attention to the necessary tools that we have put in place so that you can see the price of goods at different points of shopping and you make your choices accordingly. That is working quite well.
And the Smart Shopper app helps with that as well, too. That was launched
and that was also launched just a few weeks ago by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. So the entire ministry or spectrum of ministries that I am responsible for are fully engaged in what is happening at this moment. Yes. Right.
So, last week, well, should I say the week before, because we actually had to miss last week, and I have to apologize to our viewers at this time for that. Yes. We were joined by the Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Marcus Nato, and he said that the recent economic relief measures that were announced by the Prime Minister, of course, debated in Cabinet, was essentially and conservatively costing the government about $4 million in revenue over the initial period up to July 31st. The big question is, Dr. Douglas, is how sustainable is this? Of course, you yourself are former Minister of Finance.
Well, of course, that is not easily sustainable, mainly because we need productivity. We need to make sure that there's economic activity. And if there's no economic activity, which means then that the government is receiving taxes and fees and so forth from the increased economic activity, then it has to dig into its savings. The extent to which I can say we have a lot of savings is quite limited. Mm-hmm. And that is why I believe that what is required here is for, again, our consumers to be conscious of the changes in the prices of goods that's taking place, and act accordingly in terms of their consumption pattern. That is why the government is actively engaged in ensuring that the transition from our dependence of sugar, for over 400 years, is consolidated as we move into tourism and services generally. That is why we applaud, of course, the government, the minister, for bringing the new initiative of home porting here in St. Kitts and Nevis. That is why we continue to emphasize the need for us to build more hotel rooms, the need, I can't stress it more, for us to expand our airport facilities so that we can have as many passengers who come into our country be processed very quickly. Apart from the electronic systems that we've put in place, we need people to be properly sheltered in this, from the exposure of the elements, and to be able to do their business of traveling within the confines of decency and order. So we are aggressively, as an entire government, across the broad spectrum of activities, energy, water, making sure that there is investment in these areas, that the transition from our fossil dependence with regard to energy is, moved towards greener, renewable energy from the sun. That is why last week, 2 weeks ago, we were so excited when we were able to put out the necessary documentation for people to respond to come and build for us a 50 megawatt solar plant. That is why we are continuing aggressively, almost overly persistent, asking the international community to come forward and help us develop the geothermal energy that is in Nevis. Because we believe that is going to be a major solution to a lot of our problems.
The Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine, stated if you fix the energy problem, then you fix almost everything in the society, because everything ties back to energy and how much the governments of the region, the ECC of course, have to spend on fossil fuel to power the governments and to power their countries, to fuel their economy. Now, you mentioned home porting.
Yes.
And that is scheduled to come on board in November 2027,
That's
tentatively. But you also mentioned, as part of the St. Kitts and Nevis being a part of the United Nations and the transition to a sustainable island state,
right,
and finding partners who will be able to assist with renewable energy and the transition. I believe that was something that was discussed in Vienna. It's a conference that you recently would have participated in. Tell us a bit about that.
Right. Recently, I was in Vienna just about 2 to 3 weeks ago. When I was on that same visit to open our new High Commission in India. But in Vienna, what the Austrian government did was bring to Austria, to Vienna, all of the countries that are classified as small island developing states. And with their firm commitment to the SIDS agenda that was adopted at the OAS recently in Antigua, not the OAS, sorry, the SIDS conference in Antigua, we were there meeting not only the private sector and the government supported entities in Austria, but from all around the world. People were there offering whatever services, what capital support that they can provide to finance the operations that we are seeking to transition ourselves out of dependence on fossil fuel. And that has gone very, very well. A number of initiatives were pursued. Austria, as you know, is a member of the European Union, itself being interested in having a candidate elected at the United Nations elections soon to come for the Security Council, was an excellent host. And this is exactly what we anticipate, that countries around the world which have friendly, established relationship with St. Kitts and Nevis will come forward to assist us at this time, because they need our political support at the global, international, multilateral level. And so I don't think we are short now of that kind of offer. What we need to do is to bring ourselves in the proper sphere of assessment and selection so that we would have the right people to assist us. Just recently, as I mentioned, and I was on that visit to Austria, I also went to India and opened our new High Commission there and was introduced to one of the largest conglomerates in India, a company called GMR. And they are into airport development, energy development, all kinds of things. The team is supposed to visit here very shortly. So we are not short of those who want to provide support and assistance. Of course, we have to examine very closely the content of their presentations and proposals and see how those fit into our own agenda and our own ability to accommodate so that we can move forward with our projects.
I want to come back to the India discussion a bit later, but let me just piggyback on something that you referenced in terms of the support in the United Nations. Of course, you mentioned Austria is seeking St. Kitts and Nevis and other smaller and developing state support to become a member of the UN Security Council.
Including India.
Okay, to be a part of the UN Security Council.
Right.
But here's the thing though, Dr. Douglas. How does St. Kitts and Nevis resist, or should I say navigate the pressures to choose sides, particularly when there is a conflict between long-standing allies? And I'll give you an example. The United States, of course, there are issues with Venezuela. We saw what happened there. And also we see what's happening with Cuba. So how do we navigate these pressures?
Right, this is a very important question because you see, St. Kitts and Nevis finds itself in somewhat difficult, if I may use the term, situation where our big brother to the north, United States of America, has, of course, conflicting interest with regard to our interest, with regard to Cuba and Venezuela. We've always had an excellent relationship with Venezuela. I can remember as relatively young, President Perez, I think it was, before Chavez,
okay.
There was a Perez who basically was progressive and brought, those were the days of Thatcher, if I'm not, Sir Robert Llewellyn Thatcher. Those were the days. So the relationship with Venezuela is long-standing. And then Chavez came, and with his very strong policies in terms of social transformation, etc., was able to come forward when we had the oil crisis. People maybe still don't understand, don't know. When Chavez came forward, he said, listen, you're buying our oil. We know that you're short of money, especially after the 2009, 2010 financial economic crisis. Right. He says, listen, pay only 40% of what the oil cost, the petroleum products cost. And we'll put 60% in a special fund, social development fund, that you can tap into to help with your social transformation. So we were part of that. In fact, it is to St. Kitts that he came when we were looking at the Petro-Carib conference. We were the first of the smaller countries in the Caribbean to receive him. And so we have had a good relationship with Venezuela. So we know what is the situation now. The situation has changed. Of course, we don't want to get squeezed, so we are careful. And we understand, of course, that if there were atrocities that were being created in Venezuela, that they need to be fixed. We are hoping that the intervention is not just purely political. But whatever is the situation, we would want to say to both sides that we are still here, ready to lend our support, so that at the end of the day we are not worse off, because that is the bottom line for our people. What it is, what situation, will really assist our people in their development. Situation with Cuba, that again is, I think, not ended, if I may use that term. It is unended, and we don't know what is the outcome. From time to time, we've got the rhetoric that something has to happen and so forth. But I want to use this program to say to our people and to the world, even though Cuba may have political issues, etc., Cuba has made a tangible contribution to our development. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Joe, he is the first head of government in the world who would have been trained in Cuba. So that is something that we cannot ignore. And not just simply because of that, but what continues to be the situation with regard to preparing our people, our young people, for a better future. And again, that is why we say that we hold ourselves at the center of any debate, discussion that can take place to facilitate a non-violent, non-intervention situation in Cuba. I mean, not that we are communist or anything of that nature, but I believe that where our people have benefited, mind you, don't get me wrong, millions of our people are in the United States being given a better life. But at the same time, we must therefore call for dialogue, for peaceful discussions to settle the situation without any outbreak of war. And St. Kitts and Nevis, I'm sure the Prime Minister will agree with me, stands at the center of any initiative that will facilitate greater dialogue between these two forces.
How have we helped St. Kitts and Nevis with the situation in Cuba? Has there been a response?
How we can help?
How have we helped in terms of, the Prime Minister mentioned, of course, working within CARICOM, I think Brazil, or was it Mexico, to send supplies there to assist the humanitarian effort?
Definitely. I mean, the humanitarian effort, our efforts, I think, are continuing. But we want to facilitate dialogue. We want the two sides to speak. We want
Secretary of State
Rubio,
yes.
and Raul,
the President of Cuba.
President, or even if not the President, the Foreign Minister, to be able to speak and see if we can settle these differences.
Right. I'm going to come back to Cuba a bit later as well, too, because it speaks to Dr. Douglas. As you refer to St. Kitts and Nevis' position, now we are part, of course, of the OAS.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, we're part of the UN. But let's keep it regional. We are part of CARICOM, we're part of OECS as well, too. Being member states, because, of course, you see what's happening within CARICOM right now, that there is a bit of an argument that has spilled out in public, as Prime Minister Holness described it. Unity is very important, and for sovereign states to have a unified position on certain areas can be very difficult at times. You, as I mentioned, have been at the helm of regional and international diplomacy for many, many years. So how then does being a member of CARICOM, OAS, and OECS, so how does that shape our diplomatic position on certain issues? Is it something that would override our own interests? Do we go along to get along? Or do we essentially ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis is represented first in choosing positions?
Well, St. Kitts and Nevis on international matters like what we've been describing and discussing earlier would always try not to do it bilaterally. We will try to do it within the context of our regional machinery that is already in place. The machinery was created for us, and we must use it. So the Caribbean community is there, the Secretariat is there. Not only do the heads meet, but you also have a body called the Council, Foreign Ministers and Foreign Relations, of which Foreign Minister, in fact, I'm the current chairman of that particular council. And so we want to use the established institutions within the bodies that we have created to assist us in making decisions. St. Kitts and Nevis at the moment is heading that important organization. And so we don't necessarily have to go out on a limb and stand on our own. We try to make sure that there's a collective response and agreement and action accordingly. This matter with Trinidad, etc., is unfortunate because what really I believe, and this is important, I believe that according to the regulations and the rules of operations and so forth, that you should have a consensus. And that is why we don't do it individually. But we have a consensus among us as to what the position should be. Voting with a majority, I understand, is not consensus. When we meet in cabinet, we don't vote, but we express our views. Mm-hmm. It might be counter to what is germane to the subject matter, but you discuss, and of course, at the end of the discussion, the position is distilled, and then it is taken, and there is consensus. If there's no consensus, if there is one or two members who think that, boy, I can't live with that consensus position, you resign from the cabinet. You go away. And I think we would want to operate in a very similar way. What is going to be critically important, though, is for us to understand what transpired, what it is that actually happened. And there have been suggestions that maybe one of the pathways that we should take is have a respected person look at facts, distill them, and say, fellas, these are the facts. Here is where we are right. Here is where we may be less right. Mm-hmm. And having had the facts, then let us do something about it. And I still believe that we can arrive at that position.
You still believe in strength and CARICOM?
Of course, of course. Look at the situation with Trinidad. Trinidad had said first he's going to drop out of CARICOM. We can't. Because the entire economy of Trinidad and Tobago, to a large extent, is hinged on its presence in CARICOM. It's trading, the manufacturing of its goods, the trading of those goods. It's relatively close to Latin. Mm-hmm. Dominican Republic with a massive market and manufacturing capability. And to the north, you have the United States. So our people will move and get the cheapest goods. Whereas, right now, we, to some extent, must, except we in CARICOM agree that you will go outside. And if you go outside, then you have to pay a certain level of taxation. A tariff is imposed. So that's why it is important that we arrive at a solution. I don't think Trinidad is thinking of getting out of CARICOM.
The Prime Minister said no.
Right. It won't. It's too much to lose. So therefore, let us settle the differences. Let us have an examination of the facts. Let us know. I wouldn't say who is not telling the truth, because all of them are honorable men and are telling the truth. But maybe how the fact is interpreted or misinterpreted. Let's have someone to say, these are the facts, and let us move forward.
Let me just touch on one last issue before we take our first break from the CARICOM 50th conference that was held here. There was a commitment made by the United Arab Emirates and also by Saudi Arabia, because they had special guests who participated in the conference.
Yeah.
and they made a commitment to lend additional support, as you spoke about the importance of supporting the initiatives in the region, particularly in the St. Kitts and Nevis becoming a sustainable island state. Now, of course, we've seen support from Saudi Arabia in particular with desalination, and also in efforts to transition to renewables, as you mentioned it. But we also see, Dr. Douglas, what happened in terms of them being targeted by Iranian forces after the war began. How much do you think, or do you think at all, that there will that impact the commitment that Saudi Arabia and the UAE made to support St. Kitts and Nevis and other CARICOM member states?
I believe that if it affects the relationship, it is momentarily. It can't be for a very long period of time. Because already in Saudi Arabia and UAE, in particular in UAE, because I'm more familiar with UAE, a number of adjustments have already begun. Although I think yesterday, the foreign ministry reached out to our ambassador there, Ambassador Hawley, who transmitted to us, and in fact, the foreign minister did reach out to me directly, that we need a statement to condemn what Iran did yesterday in terms of letting go some more firepower at them. So we know that they are going to be affected, but I think that they have the capacity to rebuild. The mere idea that today, if you follow what's happening, there is a commitment now from the United States to remove the barrier of petroleum products moving out of Iran so that it can be accessed by the rest of the world. And you mentioned it at the beginning. It's not only oil, but goods generally, medicine. There was a grave concern last week that the medicines supplies are being prevented, and what we already have around the world, not just St. Kitts and Nevis. Well, I haven't heard anything from St. Kitts and Nevis, but shortages have already begun to be registered. Then we now have today the distinguished President of the United States has said, well, the blockade with regard to the strait that allows the movement of Iranian vessels out, that's stopped. Yes, we moved that. So later today, this evening, we may hear an announcement that Iran has unblocked, lift the embargo or whatever, in the Strait of Hormuz, so that there will be free movement in and out. I say that to emphasize, therefore, that solutions have to be found. Both the UAE and Saudi Arabia will soon rebuild. And they, I'm sure, would be in a position to lend support to our own infrastructural development as they had been committed to do. Of course, a lot of work will be available to their own people, to the engineers, etc., who would be rebuilding their infrastructure. And at the same time, we are hoping that ours will not be affected. But in reality, things would have been slowed. And that is where the geopolitical situation is affecting us all the way down here in the Caribbean region, the smallest independent country, I think, in the world. So you're right, as you said from the beginning, we are being impacted. And the quick resolution by the sides talking to each other, and of course, with the intervention, it would appear, of China, where it is now being said that President Trump is to visit China sometime next week. All that, I think, the geopolitics of the United States of America is now allowing it to maybe practical solution. Listen to that voice, listen to this voice, listen to our voice as well, and let us find the resolution. And I'm hoping that when the resolution would have been found, then a little time will be given to us here in St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of our own infrastructural development, which is why, however, we have not halted our efforts. I told you I was in India, GMR. Last week I met a group that came in here, wants to take responsibilities and charge for the home porting preparations, both airport and even building of hotels. So people are coming in. So we don't necessarily have to depend on the Middle East alone. We have others who have an interest in their development and expansion of their own businesses, industrial development and industrial services that they are provided, and we here are ready to be the beneficiaries.
This is a good time for us to transition to have that discussion on India and also the Commonwealth, because of course St. Kitts and Nevis and India are part of the Commonwealth. But we're going to take a break, Dr. Douglas. The countdown timer is not running, so I seem to have lost track of time. We have just about maybe 20 minutes left. So what we're going to do is play a quick video of your time in India when you went to open the High Commission there, and then we have a discussion on that.
Very well.
Stay right there, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more in focus. Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with the Senior Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Persons looking at this program would have just seen a video of yourself in India. The opening of our new High Commission there. Right. Is it the first OECS country to have a
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where was this?
Well, the first OECS, Guyana is there and Trinidad's there. They're there.
Yeah. Where was this the right time to have a High Commission established in India? Officially?
Well, remember that India is an emerging power, emerging power. And the technology development in India is something else. The country is rich. The country has resources, enormous resources. And we have a lot of people from India here. When we started Port Zante development, the Minister of Tourism then, Dwyer, he said to us, I'll go to St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, and to St. Martin and encourage the Indians to come here because they are already accustomed to work within the cruise facilities in St. Thomas and St. Martin, and also go to Alaska when the off-season.
Really?
Yeah. And so they are there. So to a large extent, India is known to St. Kitts and Nevis as a country that has an interest in the area that we have identified for our development. We have become a services economy. Services led by tourism. Cruise facility was critical in the diversification of tourism in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I give credit to the government before us to start that. But of course, our our team carried it forward. And so India is important to us, apart from cricket. India is important.
Yes.
You know. And the information technology, as it is driving India's development, we believe that this is a good place to try our very best. Plus, we've had a number of investments in tourism, and again, they have some connection to India. So it was important that India be one of those countries that we establish diplomatic relations with. As I said earlier, as you asked, we are the first from the Eastern Caribbean to establish a permanent presence in India through our High Commission. And we do so, and we've also said to our friends in the OECS, I was there, we had last week, Monday, in St. Vincent the Grenadines.
That was for the OECS Council of Foreign Ministers meeting.
Yes. I said, fellas, we have a presence in India, and even though it is St. Kitts and Nevis, it's for all of you. Just tell us how we can facilitate and so forth. So India is critically important, especially as an emerging power. And that is why we were very pleased that when we made the request of the government nodded and said, yes, we will accept. And so we have sent. We have not said much about it as yet because we haven't opened the facility. But in Singapore, again, we are the first, this time for the whole Caribbean, to have been given the agreement to establish our presence, High Commission, in Singapore. So very shortly, we would be making the move to open officially the High Commission. We already have had an appointment of someone to deal with that. And in India and also Singapore, they are both citizens who are in charge of the diplomatic relations.
You just broke some news, Dr. Douglas. Why Singapore? Because you spoke about India, and you mentioned, of course, and I'm not sure if you'd want to come back to it in terms of support for the cruise facility.
Yes.
And another area, but maybe you should just run back to them quickly. But why Singapore?
Well, Singapore, again, is one of the most successful states, financially and otherwise. It is a rich state, and it's small. Lee Kuan Yew, remember, he created a revolution in Singapore. And so even though we are small, we believe we can live well, and we want our people to live well. And so we believe that having relationship, and again, they have interest in us politically, because they need our vote. Our vote means much. And so, again, took some time, but eventually the Singaporean government gave the agreement that we will have you. And we've met at least on 2 occasions, Foreign Minister and myself, and we are working on that. Soon, we will open our High Commission in Singapore.
Breaking news right here on InFocus.
Right.
So, in terms of the specialty in terms of financial area, I imagine that is something that the government is attracted towards. In financial services, of course, has long been something that is really considered to help to power the transition to a more diversified economy.
Right.
Okay. And in terms of India, just run through again, sir, if you will, the benefits of having that and some of the projects that we can expect to support today. I think you mentioned a hotel as well, too.
Right. Yes, we've had a number of companies interested. India itself has offered a lot of assistance. The Indian government has offered a lot of assistance to us. We've already had quite a bit of support from India. Right now, they're trying to establish a lima beans activity here in St. Kitts and Nevis. They would take all of the lima beans that we can produce. We are a bit slow in the uptake, but I'm sure that with time we would act and respond appropriately. Team was here a few weeks back, maybe 2-3 months back, and we are working on that. As I mentioned, airport development, airport expansion and consolidation for our role and responsibilities as a home port in. Offers have been made. The transitioning of the Fort Thomas Hotel, that also is being pursued by Indian financing. And to a large extent, it dovetails very nicely into what would be one of the services offered in our tourism development. So, in the IT, again, in terms of government, transitioning our communication internally and communication with the rest of the country digitally, India will assist us in that as well. We have different and many others who are on board to assist us. India is also there, willing to assist us. In a lot of areas.
And that's
sports.
interesting, because I'm sure a lot of persons didn't know that.
Of course, sports, India is one of the leading international countries with regard to sport. That also is one of the areas that we can tap into. And business people who have an interest in the presence of India here are offering to assist with regard to social development projects in several different ways. Maybe you don't know, but the Kayan jet is an Indian. Nayak. Kayan, spelled the other way, is Nayak.
Yes.
He's an Indian developer. He's been here for over 10 years. Met him at the trial match for Warner Park when it was the cricket stadium when it was being repaired. Casual conversation. He liked the place, came. Millions of dollars invested in Kayan. So, and there are others who continue to have an interest in our development and welfare. And that is why I think that India is a good partner to assist us in our development.
Dr. Douglas, 8 minutes left. Let me jump to two quick issues. Commonwealth. The Commonwealth Foreign Ministers meeting. Of course, the Commonwealth is very huge, and I suppose the discussion for St. Kitts and Nevis being a part of the Commonwealth, and if it's still relevant today, can be discussed at a different time. But there was mention that was made in the creation of a Commonwealth investment network, which encourages private investment into climate resilient projects. Of course, that's something that you've mentioned throughout this program, and local businesses. Now, are there local projects or businesses that have been targeted here in St. Kitts and Nevis to benefit from this network?
Yes, to a large extent, the British government, one of the main architects in the Commonwealth of Nations, has basically offered, and we have not taken it up, it's unfortunate, a few £1 million in order to partner with the government in a number of different initiatives. In fact, when I was there, as you mentioned a few weeks ago, to observe the Commonwealth Day and the Commonwealth Finance Ministers meeting, the areas that we have been requesting support and which we understand we will receive support, again, energy. In fact, I did mention the need for onshore energy to the ships, and they said, just let us know, just get us the project details, and we will be able to help you and partner with you. The airport expansion, as I mentioned before, we have offers from, again, through that particular Commonwealth Investment Network. It's usually a joint effort, British or Commonwealth financing jointly with local, domestic, to move a number of developmental projects forward. Energy, infrastructure, well, water, you mentioned it earlier. If you resolve your energy issues, you're going to resolve the water issues and your agricultural issues, because irrigation is critical if we are going to really move forward. In fact, you mentioned that someone said it, the person who's been saying that to us all the time is the minister himself, Congress Maynard. Saying it all the time, fellas, if we can resolve the energy issue, we will move forward in a massive way to develop this country. So the British government and the Commonwealth facility on the whole is there to assist us in our infrastructural development. We have been slow on the intake, but we are now concentrating in finding the relevant partners at home who can pair with them and then pour in money to move forward. When there were some guys who were here about 2 years ago, they were from the British Parliament. They loved Kittition Hill. They loved Kittition Hill. And Kittition Hill is one of those areas that still needs to be properly pursued and developed. So we're hoping that we would be able to attract the necessary attention and capital and support generally to move this great country forward.
And you have the support of the Commonwealth, those networks, the linkages that we spoke about to help facilitate that. Finally, Dr. Douglas, I would like to touch on Taiwan. The Republic of China, Taiwan, of course, they've been a long-standing partner. They've been St. Kitts and Nevis' oldest diplomatic partner as it relates to us becoming an independent country. 1983, they were the very first.
Right.
We saw last week in the Parliament that a resolution was passed supporting their involvement, more involvement in the international community. Can you speak to us finally about Taiwan's relationship with St. Kitts and Nevis and how valuable a partner they have been?
Well, the relationship, as you said...
And I appreciate we could spend a whole show entirely.
But I will not do that.
Yes.
The relationship is a very, very strong relationship. And you're right, it started... Taiwan was one of the first countries, one of the first countries who initially came on board and established diplomatic relations with us. And the Parliament just last week emphasized that to a large extent, emphasized that particular role and relationship that exists between Taiwan and St. Kitts and Nevis. Taiwan has assisted us in several different ways. And I know sometimes we offend some of our partners in CARICOM when we speak of Taiwan as against mainland China. But there's no animosity. The Caribbean community is able to coexist with differences. Haiti, St. Kitts and Nevis, the St. Lucia, etc. And that is what it is. I think irrespective of what diplomatic ties exist between the countries of CARICOM, Taiwan will always be one of our development partners. Because Taiwan has a lot to offer the international community and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So that is why I think the Parliament, almost every year, emphasizes that with this situation, despite the challenges that we are having from side to side, Taiwan has great potential to assist countries in moving forward. We have diplomatic relations, whether or not we have had or we have. Taiwan is an important factor, facility in development, and therefore it should have a voice in the multilateral institutions. That's what we are saying.
Mm-hmm. And of course, that message has been taken outside of the Parliament of St. Kitts and Nevis, all the way to the United Nations as well. So
exactly.
There is that General Assembly, the Prime Minister advocates for Taiwan's involvement.
Yeah, some people don't agree. Even within CARICOM, this is why you keep doing that. But it is your exposure, it is your experience, and that is what is important here.
And it comes back to, as we mentioned, we're all sovereign states, we all have our own diplomatic positions, and so as it relates to St. Kitts and Nevis and Taiwan, that relationship is there. And this has always been there so long as we have been an independent nation.
Right.
Dr. Douglas, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of InFocus. I would have loved to have gotten to Haiti. It's a very pressing matter as well.
We missed that.
Well,
and as we speak, all morning, actually, we've been having calls from around the region, Haiti, and the situation with CARICOM.
you need to come back.
I shall come back.
Make some time.
God's will.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition. Next week, we'll be actually talking a bit about the new disability policy that was tabled in Parliament last week. So the minister responsible for disability, the Honorable Aislinn Phillip, will be here. We trust that you will join us then. For now, I'm Ian Richards. Remember, it's InFocus. We discuss your government, your business.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.